Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we take a stack of information and, well, try to extract the most important nuggets of knowledge for you. Today, we're really diving into something quite intriguing. It's a confidential report titled Global Power Reshuffle, Post-2008 Elite Flight and Reconstruction. Our mission, really, is to unpack what this report is claiming. It suggests the 2008 financial crisis wasn't just a systemic collapse, but more like a highly orchestrated initial crime. The idea presented is that it was designed to let financial, political, even military elites sort of slip away from Western oversight and, well, rebuild their power bases in secret.
It's definitely a fascinating document, certainly provocative. Our job today, as we see it, is to guide you through its core ideas, the specific details it puts forward. We want to make sure you understand the claims being made and what their potential implications might be. And just to be clear, as always, we're here to understand and relay the information in the report. We're not endorsing it, we're not refuting it. We'll lay it out impartially so you can form your own informed understanding.
Okay, great. So if you're ready, let's get into these claims of a massive, coordinated diversion of capital and this, well, clandestine reshaping of the global economic order. So the report kicks things off with a really bold statement, doesn't it? That the 2008 collapse wasn't some kind of accident. It calls it a premeditated initial crime. The starting gun, basically, for an organized elite flight. Sounds incredibly complex.
That's right. The document argues it wasn't improvised, not just reacting to a crisis. It suggests it was a result of a decades-long plan. A plan to completely reconfigure global power dynamics. It talks about a massive diversion of Western capital, claiming it happened between 2001 and 2008, basically setting the stage for what came next. The key insight really is that the report sees the crisis not as a failure, but as a tool, a calculated mechanism for this alleged strategic power shift.
Okay, a calculated mechanism. So if it was this premeditated crime, how does the report claim they pulled it off? What were the mechanics of this deception, both financially and, covering their tracks? Evidence erasure?
Well, the report details several key things. First, it alleges the creation of what it calls a voluntarily unstable bubble using toxic financial products. It specifically points to synthetic CDOs, collateralized debt obligations. The document describes these as incredibly complex instruments, designed not just to fail, perhaps, but to create an illusion of growth first, inflating a bubble that was sort of meant to burst in a controlled manner. And crucial to this, according to the report, were things called special purpose entities, or SPEs.
SPEs.
Right, yeah, essentially shell companies, set up to move financial risks and assets way outside the view of normal financial regulations, which makes it incredibly hard to trace the money flow or see who really benefited in the end.
Yeah.
Then there's this really unusual claim about physical and digital destruction of evidence. The report actually cites the 9/11 attacks, specifically mentioning the targeting of offices like Cantor Fitzgerald and Marsh & McLennan. It alleges those locations were somehow instrumental in this erasure. It also points to the Enron implosion, with claims of coordinated erasure in 3 data centers, and even things like dispersing critical infrastructure using online resale sites.
Okay, that's quite a claim, linking these huge public events to this alleged plan.
And what's really fascinating is the report's assertion of a convergence between security capitalism and organized crime. It alleges that high-ranking military and political figures, specifically mentioning NATO and the DoD, collaborated with transnational criminal networks. It names post-Soviet, Albanian, Turkish mafias, for example, for mutual protection and operational synergy.
That's an incredibly audacious link to draw. Security capitalism converging with organized crime. What exactly does the report mean by security capitalism? And does it offer any specific evidence for these events like 9/11 or Enron, or how these alleged collaborations actually worked?
So the report defines security capitalism as a system where national security bodies, military intelligence, become deeply tangled up with financial interest, often operating, outside the usual checks and balances. When it talks about convergence with organized crime, it's suggesting something deeper than just corruption. It suggests a fundamental shift where these traditional power structures actively merge with illicit networks. The core idea here is that this alleged collaboration isn't seen as a weakness in the report, but as a strategic advantage for these elites. It allows them supposedly to operate with both state-level protection and, well, criminal impunity.
Impunity.
As for evidence, The report mostly presents these as findings from its own intelligence gathering. It doesn't really offer specific, publicly verifiable data points for these highly sensitive claims. It presents them more as conclusions drawn from its analysis.
Okay, conclusions from analysis. So if these elites were fleeing, according to the report, where did they go? What kind of infrastructure helped this alleged flight, and why these specific places?
All right, the document points to specific retreat zones, chosen, it seems, for strategic isolation and maybe some existing infrastructure. One major area is Patagonia, covering parts of Argentina and Chile.
Patagonia, okay.
Yeah, the report claims that World War II bunkers, originally meant for Nazi exfiltration, were reactivated.
Wait, WWII bunkers? Seriously?
That's what the report asserts, yes. Reactivated for this purpose. It names places like Berlache, Villa Angostura, Puerto Belgrano, described as refuges for financial executives who allegedly had altered identities. The real takeaway here isn't just where, maybe, but how the report claims they used this pre-existing, often forgotten infrastructure.
Like the bunkers.
Exactly. And leveraged newer, less regulated areas to build this whole parallel, hidden global footprint. Another zone it identifies is Réunion Island in the Seychelles.
Island locations.
Yes. The report talks about a massive purchase of real estate there after 2009, done by offshore companies linked, it says, to former banking executives. It highlights areas like La Montagne, Céline-les-Bains on Réunion, and Eden Island, Takamaka in the Seychelles. And finally, the Middle East gets mentioned, specifically Iran and the Emirates. The document describes Iran, even with sanctions, acting as a kind of buffer zone.
A buffer zone.
Yeah, for converting financial structures into influence networks. It claims exfiltrated elites operate there under new identities, with backing from what it calls parastate factions.
That's interesting, these very different locations, each offering something strategic, it seems, for a secret operation. You mentioned parastate factions in Iran. Can you unpack that a bit? What does the report mean by a parastate entity? That sounds like more than just a criminal group.
Absolutely, yeah. It's a key concept in the report. When it says parastate, it's not talking about the official government itself. It's describing a powerful, often shadowy group that operates alongside or sometimes even within the state structure. These entities, the document suggests, can influence or even control parts of the state's functions. They blur the lines between legitimate authority and, well, illicit networks.
I see.
The significance is that these aren't just your average criminal gangs. The report alleges they have state-like capabilities, connections, providing a really strong layer of protection and operational capacity for these supposed exfiltrated elites.
Okay, that definitely broadens the scope. So how deep does this alleged military involvement go? You mentioned NATO, the DoD. It sounds like more than just turning a blind eye.
Indeed. The report details pretty significant military involvement. It argues for the use of conflicts as a cover. It specifically names the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, claiming they created the perfect chaotic environment for unsupervised transfers.
Transfers of what?
Funds, equipment, and personnel. The document alleges that U.S. logistical corridors, the supply lines, weren't just for troops. They were used to exfiltrate financial actors under military protection.
So wait, the report is claiming the U.S. military was actively helping financial players escape oversight using war zones. That's a huge accusation.
It is. And this leads to the alleged role of compromised generals and NATO logistics. The report points fingers at officers linked to specific commands, Southern Command, AFRICOM, some Balkan missions, claiming they ensured logistical continuity for this flight, disguised as, humanitarian aid or reconstruction efforts.
Disguised? Does it give any details on how that was disguised within official movements or specific examples?
The report mainly presents these as conclusions from its analysis. It might reference command structures or operational zones like AFRICOM, but usually without naming specific individuals or citing intercepted messages, for example. It suggests these operations were just woven into the existing massive logistical frameworks, making them almost invisible amidst the regular movement of people and gear, especially in the fog of war.
And what about this identity camouflage idea? That sounds pretty extreme, too.
It does. The report talks about identity camouflage in artistic media communities. It describes how public figures who had disappeared were supposedly reinserted into, artistic circles or journalism networks in places like South America, Iran, Asia. Sometimes, it claims, with apparent modification of gender or identity to completely erase their media trail and any judicial traceability.
Modification of gender or identity.
Yeah. The implication is a highly sophisticated network capable of creating entirely new, convincing personas. using these less regulated regions for the reinsertion, making any kind of tracking extremely difficult. The sheer extremity of these claims is, well, central to the report's content.
Right. It's definitely painting an extraordinary picture. So
Yeah.
connecting the dots.
Yeah.
What does this all mean for the bigger picture then? If this strategic flight and reestablishment happen as the report claims, what's the end game? What's the ultimate goal of this alleged restructuring of global power?
Well, the report asserts that post-2008, Iran takes on this role as a mafia parastate actor, essentially acting as a key platform for redistributing influence.
Mafia parastate, meaning?
Meaning, according to the document, that criminal organizations have become so integrated into the state system and economy that they actually help direct policy and control resources. Serving as this hub for influence redistribution, it describes a mix of weakened clergy, corrupt generals, and international money laundering networks, all operating together within this framework. The document then details the alleged constitution of a new financial bloc. It literally outlines corridors connecting Tehran to places like Pyongyang, Moscow, Caracas, and specific African free zones Djibouti, Port Sudan are mentioned.
So an entirely new network.
Exactly, suggesting a deliberate reshaping of the global financial circuit, moving pointedly away from traditional Western control. It also mentions the alleged reconversion of international institutions, involving the infiltration of multilateral organizations, NGOs, even UN agencies, by agents who might look like diplomats, but who, the report claims, actually answer to these criminal parastate structures.
Wow. Okay, if you piece all that together, it really does sound like the report is describing a complete redrawing of the global financial map, moving power, influence, capital outside of those traditional Western spheres we usually think about.
Precisely. The report isn't just talking about an economic shift. It's suggesting a fundamental change in how global influence is wielded, potentially operating almost invisibly beneath the surface of conventional geopolitics.
So this deep dive into the Global Power Reshuffle report, it's certainly laid out some, well, extraordinary claims, from a financial crisis being potentially premeditated, systematic evidence destruction, this coordinated flight of elites, all the way to strategically setting up new power centers.
Right. The report posits that what we might perceive as chaos or dispersion is actually, according to its analysis, a deliberate, coordinated maneuver, a redeployment of power, where capital itself becomes floating, opaque, and strategically relocated, moving beyond the reach of traditional national and Western oversight. The key takeaway from the report's perspective is that the 2008 crisis wasn't just something to survive. It was an event that was actively weaponized, to reshape global power structures.
It really makes you think, doesn't it, about how information, even from confidential, perhaps controversial reports like this, can challenge or reshape our understanding of very recent history and the forces potentially operating behind the scenes. And this raises a really important question, I think, for you, our listener. If such a clandestine restructuring is underway, as this report alleges, if new opaque power structures are operating with this kind of claimed impunity, how might future global events, crises, technological leaps, political shifts be influenced or maybe even leveraged by them? It certainly leaves you with a lot to chew on regarding the true nature of global economic and political power today.